We'll start with the first franchise, the 2 times winner, Islamabad United squad. It's being led by none other than Shadab Khan. He is one of the most prolific all-rounders in the world at the moment, especially in a T20 format. So I'm going to throw at you, Dan. We're going to start with you and just see how are you looking at the whole squad, and who do you think is going to be the most impactful player coming out of this squad for Islamabad?
It's a really interesting squad, actually, because I felt after the auction, as usual with Islamabad, really they pretty much nailed it. I felt in terms of having ticked most of the boxes with regards to the skill sets needed for success, and also had a lot of strength and depth as well, with sort of 3 or 4 players struggling to get in the 11 who probably might get into to other teams' 11 or be fighting to do so. What they've actually, I feel like they've kind of helped themselves to level the playing field a little bit with some curious replacement player recruitment. Van der Dussen for Moeen Ali, for example, is a strange one. Very different players. You've got a right-handed anchor compared to a left-handed intent merchant who bowls off spin. So that's a completely different skill set. And then they've gone sort of partial replacement pacers, overseas pacers, for batters. So for me, it's all going to be down to their batting, and their bowling, I think, takes care of itself. Whether their batting fires, Alex Hales, Sterling, Munro, I think will play now. Moeen Ali is not playing, otherwise they've got no left-handers in the top 5. And yeah, it's going to be down to the sort of big name overseas players, I think, in the top 5 for Islamabad. So Asif Ali is a bit of a worry for me at the moment, coming after a very poor Big Bash. Last couple of years, he's averaging about 10 balls per dismissal. So this is a problem. But Islamabad do have quite a lot of batting depth. There's a realistic scenario where Mohammad Wasim could bat at number 10, for example. So they do have that depth. I think still they tick most boxes, and they look in reasonable shape going into the tournament.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Dan. And Ali Tareen, I'll come to you. Do you see any kind of potential problems or issues for Islamabad United in this current squad that they have?
Yeah, so I think I've always been a fan of Islamabad United's recruitment. Going with very top-heavy batting, where you have overseas players coming in and starting very aggressive, batting till 10 or most cases. So I've always been a fan. This year, looking at the squad, and Dan's right, I think overall every squad is going to be hit by this mixed availability of foreign players, because you can't get an exact replacement for everyone, and then it doesn't really settle your squad. You have people coming, people going, so you have to keep mixing the 11 up. So I'm curious to see how this season plays out for most of the teams. I think some teams will be more effective than others. So Islamabad United, if we think about the 11, given availability of some of the players, I feel the likely starting is Paul Sterling, Colin Munro, Rassi van der Dussen, Shadab at 4, Azam 5, Asif 6, Fahim 7, 8, maybe Tom Curran, 9, Mohammad Wasim, 10, Hassan Ali, 11, Zishan Zamir. Again, batting till 10, which is great. But great point of having, do they have enough left-handers in the top order? Something to think about. Even their domestic player, Hassan Nawaz, who's an amazing, very, very high potential, very, very aggressive opener. He might get some games in the absence of Alex Hales in the beginning. Again, another right-hander. So their batting is strong. My worry is not necessarily with the batting, because they're deep enough and the pitches are likely to be very batting friendly. My concern is with the bowling. Fahim Ashraf, Mohammad Wasim, Hassan Ali, Zishan Zamir, good bowlers. Are they elite enough to win them a tournament? I don't think so. And a couple of years ago, when Islamabad did struggle, I think it was the worst season to date when they finished, I think, 6th. Their issue was, again, with the bowling. They put big scores up, couldn't defend them, because they had good, slightly, average, above average bowling, but didn't have the kind of bowling to defend totals. So I think my concern this year is with their bowling. Even Fahim, Mohammad Wasim, Hassan Ali, similar bowlers. Who's their power play specialist? Who's their death specialist? I think that's something that they might struggle in this year.
Right. So it's the bowling that worries Ali Tareen a bit. Although this year Islamabad did add Tom Curran and Tamal Mills, the likes of them to their squad. So
And Gus
maybe
Atkinson. Gus Atkinson, great
absolutely.
bowler also. But again,
Yep. So
good bowlers, are they elite compared to people like Lahore Qalandars?
well, that's the big question mark, I guess. So I'll throw that to you, Daniel. Do you mirror Ali Tareen's concerns about Islamabad, and what are you basically most excited about this particular squad this year?
I think, yeah, I do mirror some of those concerns. The biggest issue for me isn't necessarily that their bowling isn't elite. It's that the ceiling, the difference between the variance between the ceiling and the floor of their bowlers is just very high. I feel like a lot of their bowlers are quite streaky. So if they are in a good run of form, people like Hassan Ali, Shadab Khan, even Mohammad Wasim, at times, they can be sensational bowlers. But to be able to sustain that over a tournament, I feel like they don't quite have the bowlers that you can always just trust and say, we trust these bowlers to win us a tournament, take a sweep in a tournament, do the job for us. And I think that was partially their issue last year when I think they won 4 out of 10 matches initially, because I think they put up some huge totals, but then a lot of the times they couldn't defend them. And what got them through to the playoffs was their firepower. So when they were winning games, they were absolutely blowing teams out of the water. They were winning by 50 runs, 60 runs at times. And I think a couple of the other teams that were on 4 wins and 6 losses, they just didn't have anywhere near the same run rate, the same net run rate. In terms of the batting, yes, I think their firepower again is just absolutely ridiculous. It almost seems like to some extent their strategy is just going to be to try and blow teams out, blow teams away with the bat. The little thing I think is interesting in a running theme across the replacement players is I think often the intention isn't to get a replacement player that mirrors as close to possible the player you've lost, because sometimes a replacement player is just an acknowledgement that there's something you missed out in the original draft and you just want to take care of that. I think one of the glaring examples is when Peshawar Zalmi, they replaced Rothman Pahal with Richard Gleeson, because I personally think their fast bowling might become an issue at some point. So maybe for some franchises, the replacements are just trying to shore up where they think they slightly missed out in the draft. So I think that might be a theme that's seen across all the 6 squads that we analyze.
Right. So let's throw it to Ali Khan. Ali, what I need from you is to let me know who's the key batter and the key bowler in this Islamabad United squad that you see shining throughout the tournament for them. I know it's a team game, but there are always some individual brilliance that's part of a team that takes them through. So who do you think are the key batsmen and the bowlers in this Islamabad United squad?
Yeah, I think Islamabad is, I think as mentioned a little bit earlier, they're quite top heavy. They have a lot of explosive batsmen at the top with obviously Munro and Hales and Sterling. And these are the same guys that performed last year as well. If you look at some of the strike rates that they had last year, 160, 170, 180, they were quite dominant at the top of the innings. And I suspect that it's going to be the same this year. But I think where they really struggled was on the bowling side. They were never able to control a game on that side of the ball. And I think that's where they really struggled. And I'm not sure that they were able to rectify that in the draft. I think Fazal Haq Farooqi is going to be really, really important for them, because if you look at what happened last year, and I don't think that the skills of those players has really changed, is that Mohammad Wasim and Hassan Ali, as good as they are or as good as they can be, they struggle to keep a lid on the runs, and last year they didn't even get wickets. And I suspect those are 2 guys that are going to play, and so Farooqi is going to be really important. Someone like Zishan Zamir is going to be really important. Does Zishan Zamir, step up and take it up a notch, because he's a really talented young fast bowler for Pakistan coming through the system. And I think the other side is I'm not sure about Van der Dussen's complete availability, but they need somebody in the middle order who's going to kind of guide them through chases, because they have so many guys that are aggressive. There are going to be games where you really need to kind of navigate through a chase. And guys that are going all out all the time, as fun as that is maybe not the right way to go about it every single time. And so Van der Dussen kind of having that, I hate the word anchor, but having that guy that can navigate a chase is really important. But I generally think that the lower middle order is not as strong as other teams. If you look at Multan, they have Riley Rousseau, Tim David. Islamabad doesn't seem to have that type of guy on their team, although obviously they have Shadab, who's done really, really well. So yeah, I think that's where they are. I mean, they're a team that has a lot of depth. They bat extremely deep. They have a lot of firepower. A bunch of their guys can go really hard, but I do think that they have a bit of roster replication. So it's going to be interesting to see how they put together that 11. So as much depth as they have, putting together that 11, only 11 guys can play. What that looks like is going to be interesting.
Ali, so what do you think the 11 is? What's your starting 11 for the first game, with Hales out, Fazal Farooqi out?
Well, I think they're definitely going to go. They're going with. I think Gurbaz is going to be there. So the top three is definitely.
He's not there for the first few games.
He's not there for the first few. I think it's definitely going to be Monroe, possibly Hassan Nawaz. I mean, I think because of a lot of the kind of replacement, situation, it's kind of hard to kind of know exactly what this looks like. But so I don't have a complete answer for you on that. But I think it's going to be the top heavy guys. Sterling, Colin Monroe is going to be coming up top, and let's see what they come up with. I think it's going to be Shadab at 5 is where they normally play him. Asif Ali at 6. And then down the line, it's going to be something to that extent. Maqsood is an interesting one, right? Because I think Suhaib Maqsood wants to open, but he's not going to be opening in this team if he plays. So that's something that to look out for. There are going to be guys on this team that are going to be playing a bit out of position at times.
Sorry, I also wanted to just throw in a question to people I think who are more aware with the skills that Tom Curran brings to the table, for example. I thought one of the issues with Islamabad was that they tend to be quite expensive with the ball. And I don't necessarily think the stats show that Curran is someone who solves those issues. But I think maybe, Dan, you might be able to shed light on the logic behind that and what role he sort of might play in this Islamabad side.
Yeah, so one thing I would say about Tom Curran is that his batting has actually improved quite markedly over the last year or so. So I think he does add a lot of depth to the Islamabad team wherever he bats. I mean, it's not unheard of him to bat in the top 6 even in the last year or so. So really, he's a very capable all-rounder, and I think that maybe he would bat in this particular team maybe like a 7 and drop Ashraf down to 8, Hassan Ali at 9 or something like that. But with his bowling, the biggest problem for him is the boundary concession, and I think that he's become a little bit predictable with the amount of slower balls that he bowls, and the fact that he bowls a slower ball very often in response to being hit for a boundary as well. And so I think for me, he needs to kind of look at his options a little bit more in terms of the bowling choices of individual balls that he makes. I don't think his stock ball is quite as quick as it once was as well. So there's a few challenges for him, I think, with the ball. But in the absence of Farooqi, who I agree with Ali, is someone I'm extremely excited to see in this tournament and beyond. I think that Tom Curran will probably play and have a role as one of their death bowling options as well.
So my concern in the bowling, if they have Fahim, Tom Curran, Mohammad Wasim, Hassan Ali, Zishan Zamir, all right armers. So I'm concerned that if they start off with these 5, it's a very predictable bowling attack and very one-dimensional. Wasim has somewhat different release angle, but otherwise very similar. Tom has a lot of variations, which he's been working on a lot this year, as we can see. But I think if Ruman Reis is fit and firing, then he'll likely start the tournament the first few games, because they need left armor there.
Yeah, so what's like they've got a lot of right-handed batters and a lot of right-arm pacers.
Yeah, they have a ton of depth, right? So like they have all these exciting players, but again, you can only pick 11 of them at one time. So I think one of the things that I would be concerned about, and I think Danyal mentioned it, and then Dan did as well about Tom Curran. Tom Curran is a really interesting player that kind of could potentially blend into the team, but if you have someone like a Hassan Ali that's going for runs, as he said, he's very streaky. Tom is very streaky. These guys all have really high economy rates. The best way to control a cricket match is with accurate bowling, bowlers that can control their own skill. And I think they have some guys that are spotty in that area.
Right. So let me just throw this out for if any of you want to comment on this. So we have like some exciting new talent coming along in terms of, fast bowling. We have Zishan Zamir. In terms of batting, in terms of, the new batters coming in, we have Hassan Nawaz. We have seen quite a bit of him as well. And obviously we have Mubashir Khan as well, who has had a fantastic domestic season this time. So let me throw it to you first of all, Ali Tareen, like how do you see the involvement of these youngsters and what's the likelihood of them making that playing 11?
Yeah, I agree. I think Islamabad has the strongest bench of any PSL team, so which is a huge advantage to have, especially in this kind of tournament where players are coming in and out. So Hassan Nawaz, an opener, super exciting. I'm a big fan of his. Really hope he gets some game time while Alex Hale is out. And Mubassir Khan, huge fan. I think he could be a real X factor in this team, giving them a different kind of bowling option. Obviously, Shadab is going to play every game. You have a wrist spinner. If you're having a left arm off spinner, Mubassir is going to be great. I'm just sad because they have such a huge bench that amazing players like Abrar Ahmed, Zafar Gohar, Mubassir, Suhaib Maksud are not going to get as many games. So Abrar, we obviously seen his meteoric rise in the past few months. I'm happy he was picked in PSL, but I'm sad that he got picked in Islamabad, which for him probably is the worst team he could get picked for because he is never coming instead of Shadab, and he played what 2-3 games this year maybe. Because if they're going with the additional spinner on a pitch, it'll likely be Mubassir or Zafar. So it's a great bench. It's a good problem to have, but as a cricket fan, it's unfortunate to see such good players on the bench.
True. What about you, Daniel? How do you see the whole spin department, the spin dilemma that Islamabad has? They have got huge bench strength right there. So who do you see playing? Obviously, Shadab is going to be there. He's the captain, and he is an exceptional player as well. So who do you see making it into that playing 11? Aiding Shadab in that spin department for Islamabad?
I think in general, predicting these 11s is tricky because you don't know, because there's so much variance with the availability of certain players. But yeah, I echo what Ali said. It perhaps, especially in Pakistan, maybe less so in the UAE, it makes limited sense to go with Shadab and then Abrar as well. So depending on maybe surfaces and conditions, Abrar might get a few games, but then it obviously makes more sense to have someone like Zafar and have that sort of variance in there as well. In terms of the opening, I mean, yes, we did mention we want to see Hassan Nawaz up top as well, but historically that's not really what Islamabad have done. I fully expect them to, obviously, when Hills is available, him, but otherwise they go with Paul Sterling. I think Colin Munro bats fairly high. So I'm interested to see how local batting talent develops there as well, because I think the only thing that I always come back to with Islamabad is they have produced the emerging player in PSL's history in Shadab Khan. So you never know when another one might be around the corner.
Absolutely. That's what we're all hoping for. So I'll just come to you, Dan, to wrap it up. How do you see the whole squad as a whole, and how do you compare it to the last season that Islamabad had? Obviously, they did make it into the playoffs. They were the last team to get knocked out before the finals. Had a good run. A lot of injuries in that particular season for them, and they struggled a bit to even construct their playing 11 at the end. So how do you see, how much improvement do you see in this squad, and what's your prediction? Do you see them going all the way?
I'm reticent to suggest that any team's going to go all the way. I think that a lot of the time, especially in a league like PSL where 4 out of 6 teams qualify, it's easier to qualify than not to qualify, if you like. Ultimately, you get yourself into the knockout stages, and then there's a lot of coin flips and 60-40s, high variance moments will dictate a winner rather than necessarily the best team being the winner. I think what I like about Islamabad is that they've got a clear kind of policy in terms of their recruitment generally and their structure, how they want to structure up a team with generally high intent players at the top and a lot of batting depth. We were going back to the spin dilemma. I think this is another area, another point where they could miss Moeen Ali a lot because he offered that off-spin option, a very solid off-spin option against left-handers, and then Shadab Khan against right-handers generally would be the matchup. I suppose Paul Sterling can bowl a bit of off-spin, but I'm not sure he's quite in that level of Moeen Ali as a T20 bowler. So that's one thing. And for me, ultimately, Islamabad's success or failure is going to be down to a couple of the top batters, and then whether those bowlers, as we've mentioned, can not all have a low level at the same time, if you like, in terms of boundary concession and economy rate. Teams in tournaments, if you're conceding, say, 18-19% boundaries as a team in a tournament, that's very, very difficult to qualify. You don't see many teams of that sort of level qualify in tournaments. So that's an area where Islamabad, I think, I've got to look out for. And if they can get that down to, say, 16% throughout the tournament, I think they've got a great chance.
I want to add one thing, Hijaab. When you talked about Moeen Ali's availability, I think the reason that they didn't replace Moeen Ali with a like for like is that I do think that they see Mubassir as the replacement for Moeen. Mubassir actually came up as a batsman, but specifically this year in domestic cricket, he's taken a lot of wickets with the ball. I think so. I think that their thinking is that Mubassir is going to be that guy who comes in the middle order and bats, and then also bowls right arm off spin to add variation to what Shadab does. So I think I would be looking out for that.
Yeah, and just to conclude, if I may, when I look at Islamabad United, I look at a team which has a plethora of all-rounders. And I know that a lot of people will disagree with respect to calling Mohammad Wasim Jr. an all-rounder because of his recent returns with the bat. But this is a team that always bats deep. And the ethos of Islamabad United has always been very clear. They go berserk, they go gung-ho. So I'm not as concerned about the profile of their batters. They're all destructive. And I do believe that they will continue to get big scores. So I don't think that is an area of concern at all, regardless of what order that you play them in. I really do hope Hassan Nawaz does get a game, because in the 6 games that he played in the KPL, he scored 240 odd runs at an average of 40 and a strike rate of close to 150. So those are phenomenal numbers. And there's a certain flamboyance about that kid. So I am really, really hoping that Islamabad give him a run, especially with respect to all of the players that are missing. Where they'll struggle, I believe, is what sort of bowling order they'll go with in their first string team, because you've got the likes of Hassan Ali, Mohammad Wasim, Fahim Ashraf, Zishan Zamir, who was brilliant in the 15 odd balls that he bowled in last PSL before he got injured, bowled an absolute ripper to dismiss Babar Azam. So I'm really keen to see how they kind of figure that out, of which bowlers they are going to play versus which bowlers they aren't going to play. I do agree that the floor and the ceiling does have a big gulf with respect to the skill set of those bowlers. And that is an area which I think could come to hurt them, because if you look at the spin options, there are plenty. Fast bowlers, lots of options. Which ones are they going to go with? How quickly are they going to figure out that first string 11? I think that's the main challenge for Islamabad. But if they do get going, this is a team that none of us can ever write off. I do believe that Islamabad, if they start to gain that sort of momentum that they have in seasons gone by, they have everything that it takes to make the finals.
They do, absolutely. And thank you so much for the input from everyone. One last question, just going to go around the table. Ideal position for Shadab Khan to bat, because that is something that's been extensively discussed. And, that's something that impacts the game a lot when it comes to Islamabad. So Ali, Tareen, I'll start with you. What do you think is the ideal position for the captain to come out and bat?
So I'm expecting him to bat at 4. But they're very flexible with how they use Shadab. But again, depending on the situation, Shadab is such a good batter that he can bat in the top order, in the middle, at the death, against fast bowling and spin. He's a very competent batter, a very good captain. So I'm expecting him around 4, but I know they're going to use him in his best position.
Right. What about you, Dan?
I'm with Ali, really. I think that entry point covering the early middle overs and batting through the middle overs against spin would probably be his best position, whether that's, say, a 4 or a 5, something like that. I think the temptation with someone who's a genuine all-rounder is for teams just to bat them at 7 as a kind of a default. But I think Shadab is a much better player of spin than the average all-rounder. So batting him higher than that makes a lot of sense. And I think that middle order role makes a lot of sense for him.
What about you, Danyal?
I think the entry point, I don't think you get too much disagreement on this. I think needs to be pretty much as soon as the power play ends, so around the 7th, 8th over, whenever that particular wicket falls. So I think if they lose 2 in the power play, they might not necessarily send him in. But yeah, around the 7th, 8th over, which tends usually to be number 4. What
about you, Ali Khan?
Yeah, I always view Shadab as kind of this cheat code. If you have him on your team, there's a lot of different things that you can do. So I think I agree with everybody that number 5 position, that kind of transition from the power play to the kind of the death. I think he's a perfect player for that, and I think he's showing the growth in that area. Hopefully, the people that make decisions for Pakistan are watching the PSL this year and figure that out.
Absolutely. What about you, Behram?
So make no mistake that Shadab Khan is the MVP of this team, and he is the captain as well. And he often shoulders that responsibility to take it upon himself to dig his team out of a hole. So I expect to see Shadab Khan whenever the chips are down. if the team is in trouble, I expect Shadab Khan to elevate himself in the batting order and particularly target spin. Now, we've spoken about entry points and matchups, and both Rehanul Haq and Hassan Chima are no strangers to that concept. So I believe that if spin is on, and even if it might be in the power play, I can see Shadab being brought on earlier or promoting himself up the order, but I wouldn't bat him below 6. Absolutely not. You can't, utilize all that he has to offer. You must definitely make Shadab Khan bat somewhere in the order, and I would not like to see a situation where he just doesn't get to bat all game, because I do think that he is as good a batter as he is a bowler, and I hope that he's able to showcase that ability in this PSL like he did in the previous one.
I was going to add one point. Obviously, Shadab is very competent against spin, but he absolutely destroys full bowling when fast bowlers on. If fast bowlers bowl full, Shadab will destroy them. So he's more than just a spin hitter.
Absolutely. I mean, you can go back to that spell of Anrik Nokia in the T20 World Cup in Australia. He absolutely decimated Nokia, whether he was full and even a few short deliveries. I remember Shadab using that uppercut over third man to get a 6, I believe. So, yeah, he has the full skill set and impeccable range as a batter.
I have in mind when in Southern Punjab, Naseem Shah was bowling to him and Shadab just destroyed him. Because he kept bowling full and Shadab was just on a different level.
Right. So he is one of the most improved players recently for Pakistan, and even you can argue like even globally as well. So we're all excited, and that basically wraps up the 2-time champions Islamabad United squad. And thank you everyone for the input.